While it's true that you can find sleepers and the players that are going to win your league later in the drafts, it's the early rounds where you really want to make every pick count. So today, Dave Kluge and I are going to talk to you guys about the early round players that we are targeting in rounds 1 through 4. And Dave, I want to, before we jump into it, I want to know your strategy here. Do you tend to go a little bit safer in the earlier rounds so you can take risks later, or you just kind of just keep a blend of it all as you're going through the whole draft?
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of like super risky picks. I feel like Achane is, probably like one of the riskiest picks in the early rounds. But even him, like worst case scenario, you're probably still getting a top 10, top 12 finish. I don't think there's anybody in the early rounds this year that can really, really burn you. I feel like ADP is kind of sharp. There's a few discrepancies here and there.
Christian McCaffrey?
I mean, even Christian McCaffrey, yeah, like he can hurt you. I guess if we're looking at like volatility, sure, he's the most volatile, but the upside is so high that I'm still willing to take him. I've got him as my 7th player off the board in the first round, so I'm comfortable taking him as early as 107. But really, I mean, since we're talking about early round, what I want to tell people here is that you shouldn't go into a draft saying like, I'm going to draft 0 RB, or I'm going to draft 0 wide receiver, or I'm going to do this. I think what you really need to do is be fluid in these first 4 rounds. And then once you kind of see what those first 4 rounds look like, then you develop your draft strategy. And Alfredo, I'm laughing already because I know I talked about this so many times on yesterday's show, but the NFFC live stream that I did with Joey Wright every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, be sure to tune into it. But we just did this one with Joey Wright, and we had a weird first 3 rounds where we went running back, tight end. And I think a lot of people would look at that and say like, you shouldn't do that in the early rounds. And it definitely wasn't something that we planned to do. But after making those first 3 picks where we just got really good values on players, then we had to just really attack the wide receiver position in the middle rounds. And I don't think I ever would have thought that I'd start a draft running back, tight end, and then 6 straight wide receivers. But because the running back value fell early, and then because we were able to get Trey McBride late in the 3rd round, it shaped the rest of our strategy. So my kind of overarching advice for the first 3 to 4 rounds of your drafts is just be fluid, try to take the value where you can get it. And from there, then that should dictate your draft strategy.
You know what people love more than seeing someone else's fantasy team is hearing about it without any visual aid. It's great.
I will send the draft board over to our video editor so they can flash it during that little monologue.
Oh my God. No. Let's just hop into this because I really want to talk about these players.
Let's do it.
Dave, round 1. This is the pick you just don't want to miss, right? Who is the player that you are targeting in round 1 when you have the opportunity?
CeeDee Lamb. I've got him as my 102 in drafts this year, right behind Jamar Chase. And I've had it there since before the Justin Jefferson injury. And I think now Justin Jefferson dealing with the hamstring injury, I think you have to move CeeDee Lamb ahead of Justin Jefferson. I mean, Jefferson should be back by week 1. We're hopeful that he's going to be back by week 1, but he's missing out on camp reps right now with JJ McCarthy, a new to him quarterback. And every day that he misses can impact that chemistry. I'm not saying that like Justin Jefferson is a terrible player by any means, but we were hoping that Justin Jefferson could be the wide receiver 2 with JJ McCarthy. I mean, we were really wish casting that JJ McCarthy would be a good player. We don't have to do any wish casting or hope with CeeDee Lamb. Just 2 years ago with Dak Prescott, he was the overall wide receiver 1. I mean, this guy, his usage in this Cowboys offense, 2nd most targets since 2022 behind only Devontae Adams, most combined targets over the last 2 seasons. He is a good player in a good offense. I understand people wanting to go with Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs and Saquon Barkley ahead of CeeDee Lamb, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think those guys are good players, but I have Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb as my top 2 players, and I want to try to walk away with one of those guys in the first half of round 1 because I feel like there's so much running back value that you can get in rounds 3 and 4 and 5. So again, I think you need to be fluid here. And if you're picking at 4th overall and Bijan Robinson is there, I think that's a great pick. And if Saquon Barkley is there at 5, I think that's a great pick as well. But if I can walk away with a wide receiver in round 1, that's what I want to do. And CeeDee Lamb right now, going as a 5th or 6th player off the board, I think is just the most mispriced player in round 1.
I love CeeDee Lamb. And I actually really like the Cowboys passing offense this year. I think that people are going to be in for a surprise. I think there was a lot of like this weird narrative that they're going to be a run heavy team. And then you look at their running backs, you're like, oh, maybe they're not going to be a run heavy team. And Brian Schottenheimer's been a guy that has committed to the pass in the past. And I absolutely see CeeDee Lamb as the wide receiver 2 in fantasy football. I absolutely agree that I think he should be a top 3 pick in fantasy football. I'm taking him over Justin Jefferson. I'm taking him over Saquon Barkley too. There is one guy though, and the guy that I want to talk about that I think I'd rather have over him, and it's Bijan Robinson. You mentioned him earlier, and I think where I have a differentiation here is I want to have the best running back, and this player gives me the opportunity to have the best running back by a wider margin than maybe CeeDee Lamb being the best wide receiver compared to the other players. Does that make sense? Because right now, Bijan, his ADP, he's going anywhere from picks 2 to 5. And I already had someone in the comments this morning. It's like, you're not getting Bijan if you're not at the one of the top 2 picks. That's simply not true. Yeah. You're getting Bijan at the 3rd pick, the 4th pick, the 5th pick, and in certain draft apps as well.
It's impossible to predict. I've done over 100 drafts already. That 2 to 5, like it's like you just throw them into a cup, shake them up, and just spill them out. It is different in every single draft.
And I know that like we love the, I guess the reliance or the reliability of a wide receiver like a CeeDee Lamb, like a Jamar Chase, and their obvious explosive ability, their obvious touchdown upside that they have. Every year when we look back at who was the player that made the biggest difference for teams that won the championship, it ends up being the Saquon Barkleys, the Christian McCaffreys, the Jonathan Taylor go back a few years. It's always that running back that got that absurd workload and the high upside touchdown variance, the receiving work, all those things. Bijan Robinson is that special player that I see this being able to happen for. And it's not just me like wish casting it. He's one of only 3 running backs in NFL history to record 2,400 yards and 100 receptions in their first 2 seasons. The other guys were LaDainian Tomlinson and Edgerrin James. So we know we're already dealing with a very special talent with Bijan, but he's also one of the few running backs that's a lock for 340 touches with his type of receiving upside in an offense that truly has to run through him. Now, yes, we're going to see plenty of Drake London as well, but outside of that, the Falcons can't rely on Kyle Pitts. We're now seeing an injury that's popped up here for Darnell Mooney, and we don't know how that's going to affect him throughout the year. And they really didn't add anything else in the backfield or in the receiving core. So I don't know that this team is going to look any other direction than Bijan Robinson. And there were so many things we said last year about the Zach Robinson offense. He's the offensive coordinator there in Atlanta, and how he has worked with running backs, whether that be Kyren Williams or even Todd Gurley and various running backs that we've seen in that Rams offense. It's the Sean McVay coaching tree, and a running back in a Sean McVay offense tends to produce over and over and over. Could Michael Penix be bad? Sure, like that is very possible. But the Falcons have also just had bad quarterbacks every single year with Bijan Robinson. And even last year with Kirk Cousins struggling, they were still 6th in yards per game. Like this is a player who is script proof. He is team proof. And if we want to look at the upside argument for him, and I know we shouldn't do this where we extrapolate from small sample sizes, but if we want to look at the upside case for Bijan, look at those final 3 games with Michael Penix. You go and take a look at them, 26.8 fantasy points per game and half PPR over that small sample size. If we look at Saquon Barkley, top running back, across the season, 21.2 half PPR fantasy points. So we're talking about a difference of over 5 fantasy points per game. Is that likely to happen? No. Should we expect regression? Yeah. But there are other guys who had big ends to the season, just like Bijan, who like Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, who like Gibbs has David Montgomery returning and a new offensive coordinator. The offensive line got worse. With Jonathan Taylor, his offensive line got worse. We don't know the quarterback situation. You bring in Tyler Warren, who might even steal some goal line touches. If Anthony Richardson is healthy, he's stealing goal line touches. Bijan Robinson's the only guy where it's like, nobody's going to be stealing goal line touches. Nothing new is happening. This is solidified that he should not only be a top 5 pick, I'm actually comfortable taking him at number 1 overall.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to push back too hard. Like I said, I think this tier from 2 to 4 or 2 to 5 is so tight. I do have Robinson as my 5th player overall. I prefer Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, CeeDee Lamb, and Jamar Chase. And I know I'm going to get so much pushback for the Saquon Barkley, but this is just a, matrimony of a great player in a great offense behind a great offensive line. I'm not really scared about last year's touches. I think that you can kind of bet on Saquon Barkley to continue being an outlier. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, I mean, I think that in a vacuum, Bijan Robinson is in a better situation, but I think that Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson project pretty similarly, but Jahmyr Gibbs does have that contingent upside that we saw at the end of the year, where if David Montgomery misses any time, we're looking at like a 30 point per game scorer in that offense. So again, I mean, these guys are the margins between these players from 2 to 4 are razor thin. I've got Bijan Robinson as my 5th player overall, but I wouldn't fault anybody for taking him as high as 2.
Yeah, I think my only pushback that I'll have there is like I don't want to draft a player in round 1 for contingent upside. Like I just kind of want to know the full spectrum of everything, which is impossible to do in fantasy football. I want to feel a little more solidified with their role, and that does like worry me ever so slightly with David Montgomery returning for Jahmyr Gibbs. But honestly, it like you said, it's razor thin the margins with these players. We're arguing who should go 1 or 5. Like it really doesn't matter in your fantasy football drafts because everything's so interchangeable at this point. Dave, let's go to round 2, where this is where we tend to see these players that are falling, that oftentimes I think that when we rank them, we think these players should probably go in round 1. Who do you have here?
And there's a lot of players I like in round 2 this year. I mean, this was really hard to boil it down to just one guy. So what I did is, I'm just put my money where my mouth is. I looked at who I have drafted the most of with a round 2 ADP, and that player ends up being McConkey, a guy that I think is just a little bit mispriced right now. We already talked about it. I'm not going to open the whole Amon-Ra St. Brown can of worms again, but we talked about it on yesterday's show that I do prefer McConkey to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And like a lot of rookies, it took him some time to heat up. The first half of the season, he was getting some pretty limited usage. A lot of what he was doing was coming out of the slot. The production was okay, but nothing mind-blowing. But man, week 8 onward is when we saw him really turn it up. His 17 game pace from week 8 onward, 124 targets, 99 receptions, 1,500 yards and 8.5 touchdowns. You look at that over a full season, that would have been the wide receiver 4 in scoring last year. And that doesn't take into account his playoff game where he had 14 targets, 9 receptions, 197 yards and a touchdown. I mean, we just saw this guy every single week getting better and better and better. He is a bona fide stud. First round pick. He can play out of the slot and get those layups, those easy short throws. He can win deep. He can make plays after the catch. And the Chargers have made a lot of investments in the offense this year with Trey Harris and bringing in a Rodney Gadsden and obviously the first round pick in Omarion Hampton. It seems like they have done a rebuild the right way where they really focused on the trenches for a handful of years. And now they're starting to get these fun skill players that they can plug into the offense with Justin Herbert. So I'm just expecting this Chargers offense to be very good this year. McConkey to be the wide receiver 1 and maintain that pace that we saw over the second half of last season. So he's a guy right now that's typically going in the middle to end of round 1, but I've got him ranked as my 14th player off the board, meaning that I would take him early in round 2. Yeah, sorry, in round 2.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm seeing him even go as late as round 3 in some of these where he's going on that 2-3 turn. And that's, listen, man, I think what we're doing is what's happening is that some of these wide receivers are getting mispriced because I think, like, for example, Brock Bowers is probably a little overpriced. I think some of these quarterbacks are getting pushed up, and that's just sort of moving things the wrong way for these players. So yeah, like I'm with you on McConkey going in round 2. You mentioned the additions.
Fact check myself. I did say first rounder. He was a second rounder, went 34th overall. I always get confused. Yeah. There was that cluster of wide receivers last year that went like late first, early second. And I always forget, like it's actually the guys that went early second ended up being better than the guys who went late first. And I always got to, in retrospect, get that.
Wasn't it also confused. The year where the Dolphins didn't have a first round pick? So it was like, if you were the 33rd pick, you were technically the 32nd pick.
That was a couple of years ago.
Maybe it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was the year that the Bears gave away their second round pick, which ended up kind of being a first round pick. It always comes
back to the Bears and Dolphins, huh?
Yeah, that 32nd overall pick for Chase Claypool. What a time to be alive.
That's how we remember things. All right. Mm-hmm. My player here in the second round, I went back and forth on this, man. And like, I started to think like, okay, if I want to go for another guy that I think has tremendous upside here with a good floor, Drake London, that makes sense, right? Man, Brian Thomas has some amazing upside. Josh Jacobs was like a guy I was like, this is probably the safest pick in this round, especially with Marshawn Lloyd suffering an injury. And then it came down to 2 players, Nico Collins or Devon Achane. And this is where I look at both of these guys and say, man, they both have really strong floors. Who gives me the ceiling that could absolutely break fantasy football? And for me, I had to go with Devon Achane here as the second round guy that I want to target. And we should see a more prominent role this year for him without Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. And I know they have the younger guys, Jalen Wright and Ollie Gordon, but both are extremely unproven. Mostert and Wilson were getting a little bit more benefit of the doubt, especially when it came to like goal line stuff, short yardage stuff. Devon Achane is a guy that I think we need to be talking about as a first round pick. And Dave, you mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs as a guy that you're extremely high on. When I did just a very basic comparison, right? It doesn't tell the full story, but very basic comparison of Devon Achane with Tua Tagovailoa in the lineup, over 22 PPR points per game. Jahmyr Gibbs with David Montgomery
9.
In the lineup.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No. Sorry.
I thought you were going to say
Tiger, easy.
Well, the Devon Achane splits without Tua Tagovailoa are atrocious. It was like 9.7 games or something. Yeah.
Let me get there, babe. Let me get there. I'm doing it. I promise. But then I compared it to a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, who when he had David Montgomery, which is to be expected this year, he was below 19 points per game. He was at 18.9 points per game. So to see that Devon Achane in his normal ecosystem is roughly 3.5 points higher than Jahmyr Gibbs in his normal ecosystem, which once again, you get into a dangerous game if you try to extrapolate one way or the other of with players, without them. These are the splits. So this is what's going to happen. It's not that. It's that we can see the vision of what can happen for a player when everything is going the way it's supposed to. And all of that is to be said with Devon Achane getting just 62% of the snaps, which was 19th amongst running backs in the NFL. That number could and should go up. A lot of the negative from him last year was when Tua was out, which, by the way, can absolutely happen again. When Tua was not there, Dave, you're right. It's closer to 9 PPR points per game. That was 2 receptions per game that he was getting during that time. A lot of that came down to really bad QB play and Jonnu Smith being a guy that was just absorbing targets. With Jonnu Smith out, and now, not that it's this amazing backup quarterback, but Zach Wilson being there, we're looking at something that should be a little bit different should Tua Tagovailoa go down. And when we look back at last year, Devon Achane with both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on the field, but no Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane was at a 22% target share. That would be number one amongst running backs, who Alvin Kamara was number one at 19.6. So this is, once again, a player that has a massive gap in a data set that matters. And looking at the Dolphins, tight end is going to be a non-factor. The secondary is absolutely decimated. The defense is going to be really bad. The offense might lead the league in pass attempts. And if Devon Achane is going to be the number 3 or potentially number 2 pass catcher on a team that's having issues with their wide receivers, they do have an improved offensive line. This is a player who's had the most fantasy points per touch amongst all running backs over the last 2 years. Yes, I want to go for the upside of Devon Achane in round 2.
Yeah, I'm completely with you there. I've got Devon Achane as my number 4 running back in drafts this year, and I just published my running back rankings a few days ago. It's Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, and Christian McCaffrey are all my tier 1 guys, and I labeled that tier could be the overall RB1, and I think that people aren't even taking into account that is literally the upside for Devon Achane, and I like this because we've seen this. Mike McDaniel offense has changed a lot. Could be injuries, personnel changes, whatever it may be. We've seen very different Mike McDaniel offenses over the years. And what I especially like is that we've seen 2 paths to very good production for Devon Achane. His rookie season, he wasn't catching a lot of passes. He was coming in as the change of pace guy and just ripping off 80-yarders, what seemed like every single week. Just one of the most efficient rushers we've seen in NFL history. Last year, he gets a bigger workload. The rushing efficiency goes down a little bit, but he makes up for it being an extreme pass catcher. Like you said, 22% target share in some of these games. So there are multiple outs to an elite finish, whether it be that he returns to the guy he was his rookie season and just starts, Jalen Wright is a little bit more involved, and we don't see quite as much opportunity, but we see him go back to that rookie season efficiency, or whether he maintains the role as the workhorse, or whether he maintains this out as a pass catching back. There are so many ways that he can score fantasy points that he's just an easy pick. And before I talked about Ladd McConkey, I said round 2, there are so many players I like here. And really what it comes down to, Nico Collins, he goes round 1 in a lot of leagues. So that's why I didn't really feel like it was fair to talk about him. I think he's getting pulled down by a handful of sites. But man, like Nico Collins, Ladd McConkey, Drake London, Devon Achane, those are the guys in round 2 that I want to draft. There's a lot of other guys in round 2 that I'm not even really entertaining. It seems like one of those 4 guys I'm walking out of with in round 2 of every single draft.
Yeah, and I think this is where, yes, you want to be as safe as you can in early rounds, but you also do need to be looking for upside. Like, this is not something that you turn off and then turn on as rounds go on. And like you said, like, there's not huge differences between these players. And I hate to say this because it's kind of like defeats the purpose of what we do, but I really want to just like lift the veil on it. There's a lot of luck of whether a player is going to stay healthy or not. Like, everything in the data sets tell you Christian McCaffrey should probably be the number one player getting drafted in fantasy football. But if he's not healthy, then there's a big issue there. And I think that gets baked into his draft cost as to why he's not going number one overall. So, like, I don't think there's a lot of arguments to be made against first and second round picks, but you still want to have that upside baked in. So I'm with you 100% there. Let's move on to round 3 here, where I think this is where I would say things do start to change a little bit. You start to find yourself into patterns of maybe there's more wide receivers I like from here. There's more running backs from here. This is where all of a sudden there's new positions. There's quarterbacks and tight ends, players like that. So where'd you go here in round 3?
I went with a running back, and I feel like this is a pocket where I really like a lot of the running backs, but the one that jumps out to me specifically, I've done a complete 180 on Chase Brown. And I think early in the offseason, we have our dynasty brains on, and I'm looking at Chase Brown, who is an undersized, relatively unathletic, day 3 pick, and all of those things concern me when I'm looking at trying to project 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, but we're in redraft season. I couldn't care less about what happens in 2026 and beyond. And right now, it seems like the path is paved for him to have a pretty similar role to what he did last year. And my take early in the offseason was pretty simple. 96% opportunity share over the back half of the season. I said, if we shave 10, 15% off of that, I was thinking about it as just shaving 10 to 15% off of his overall production, which would have pushed him from being a top 5 running back to more of a top 12 running back. And I was worried that that could happen a little bit. The more that I've looked at this and talked to some other people who've challenged my opinion a little bit, even if we shave a little bit off, if he goes from a 96% opportunity share to a 70 or an 80% opportunity share, he should still have a stranglehold on the high value touches, the pass catching opportunities, and the goal line work. And that's really what we care about for running backs. So now we've got the news that they waived Zach Moss dealing with this neck injury. So even less competition than there was. Samaje Perine, he's a familiar face there in Cincinnati, but whether it be on the Chiefs or the Broncos, he just looked like a shell of himself over the last handful of years. Taj Brooks is a guy that I like a lot. Don't get me wrong. I really like Taj Brooks, but I think rookie year, we're going to see him kind of relegated to a similar role that we saw Chase Brown in his rookie year, where he's coming in as this change of pace guy, getting the occasional touches here. And I don't think they're going to trust him on pass catching downs. They're not going to trust him near the goal line. I think what we might see is Taj Brooks coming in for 5 to 8 touches a game on early downs in between the 20s. And if anything, that can help keep Chase Brown fresh enough that we can see him go back to that rookie year efficiency where he was leading the league in breakaway run rate. So I'm not overly concerned about the added competition in the backfield. I think that this actually could end up being a benefit for Chase Brown, and the drumbeat that we're hearing out of Cincinnati is them just talking about him being a focal point of the offense. They look at him on the same level that they look at Jamar Chase and T. Higgins as just a game-changing player on the offense. So early in the offseason, I was kind of out on Chase Brown, but now things have changed. My take on Chase Brown has evolved a little bit, and now he's a guy that I'm walking out of in round 3 with a lot of shares, simply because it's a good offense. He's going to get the opportunity, and I think that all of the high value touches that we really care about in fantasy football are still going to go his way.
Just when you think you're out, they pull you back in, Dave. That's
something
how
else
it happens.
This is like a me thing personally. And
oh, good.
Alfredo, we were both way in on Chase Brown last year. And I feel like this happens all the time where like the sleepers that I really, really like, they break out and then they spike in value. And then I have this visceral reaction where it's like, no, I like Chase Brown before he was
It's like
cool.
everyone finding out about the band that you really liked.
Exactly. Yeah. And I did the same thing with Amon-Ra St. Brown coming in his rookie season. I have a tweet from that offseason saying that Amon-Ra St. Brown was my favorite wide receiver in the draft, that he could lead the Lions in targets. And then he spikes to being a first round pick. And then I'm like, I don't know if I want that anymore. And now it's happening with Chase Brown. It's something that I need to reflect on and wonder why I have this visceral reaction to people liking the players that I liked. But Chase Brown was way on him, in on him last year. Liked him coming in as a rookie, actually. And then he spiked in value, and I kind of had this distaste. And now that I've looked at it a little bit closely, I think it was silly to fade him earlier in the offseason. And now I'm trying to make up for all of the drafts that I passed on Chase Brown in early.
Man, I'm with you on round 3 being a really sweet spot for drafting some running backs, because there are a couple guys there that are going, I want to say not a full round late, but they should be going in the second round. Chase Brown is one of them. And the other guy that I'm going to talk about is Kyren Williams. Because I just I don't get it what we're doing. We've done this every year with the Sean McVay running back, where it's, he drafts someone and we say, that person's gonna steal touches. And I remember like when Zach Evans got drafted to the Rams, and we're like, he's gonna be a thing. And then I remember when Blake Corum gets drafted to the Rams, and we're like, he's gonna be a thing. And then now, and I'm like, I'm not hating against these players, but I'm simply saying is like, when you have the guy who is already starting and producing consistently, is it always efficient? No. But we've seen where even the most efficient running backs simply just don't get volume. Kyren Williams is getting volume. He's been the RB6 in total points, in total fantasy points in back-to-back years. Last year, he was the running back 10 in points per game. The year before that, he was running back 2 in points per game. And this year, he's going to have one of the easier schedules. Last year, it was really tough against running backs. And that's something that, I mean, yeah, we want to say like matchups are going to be hard to decipher this early in the season, but for the most part, we kind of know how good or bad a defense is against certain aspects of offense, whether they're good against the pass, good against the run. And so we kind of know what that is. The schedule should be easier for him this year. When you have a healthy Matt Stafford, this team is rolling like no other. There should be more scoring opportunities with Devontae Adams as a part of this offense here, where last year you have the shell of Cooper Kupp, who you're not really able to move the ball as much as you'd like to. So even if the volume goes down, the efficiency should go up. Defenses are going to have to play out against both of these wide receivers here. There's a tight end. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the names. Terrence Ferguson. I almost said Jake Ferguson. Rookie tight end Terrence Ferguson. This is an offense that is going to have more weapons than they've had in the past. Yet that shouldn't affect Kyren Williams and the volume that he can get. And he's led the Rams backfield in touches in each of the last 30 games he's played. He's had a touchdown in 26 of the last 28 games, which is crazy to think that a player is that automatic on touchdowns. So when you're talking about volume on the ground, volume through the air, touchdown, and like touchdown variance becomes a thing that we get really worried about. Like, that doesn't really happen with Kyren. 26 of the last 28. You
definitely don't have to worry about Stafford trying to punch one in. I mean, he's giving that ball to Kyren Williams every time.
Right. And like, there's already talk of him negotiating a contract extension. And like, that's not something you do when you don't want to give a guy work. So yeah, I'm not worried about Jarquez Hunter being a guy that's going to take a lot of volume. Could he come in and be a change of pace guy? Absolutely. I see this the same way that
Blake Corum is the two, by the way. I still think like all this Jarquez Hunter hype. I mean, there was a lot of hype around Blake Corum last year.
We get excited about rookies, man.
Yeah. McVay says all of the things that we want to hear, like to get this, elicit this excitement about rookies. I think Blake Corum's probably still the guy, but Jarquez Hunter, I mean, he's just like the easiest pass in drafts for me right now.
Yeah, these rookies get steamed up, and it's just like Kyren Williams should be ranked as a top 10 running back. He should be getting drafted in round 2, but he's not. He's often getting drafted as the running back 12 or 13. He's going in round 3. I want this safe floor. I want this upside. I want the high touchdown upside as well in an offense that could be even better than they've been in the last few years.
Yeah, I'd say, again, dynasty standpoint, I'm a little bit worried about Kyren long-term because he hasn't gotten that contract yet. And like, if they were really incentivized to keep him around long-term, he'd have an offer on the table. And we've been hearing about this offer for the last 6 months that is yet to come to fruition. So long-term, I'm a little bit concerned. But again, we're talking about 2026 and Kyren Williams. This is where there's like a big disconnect between the actual game of football and fantasy football, or people who watch the game and people who live in spreadsheets, because the efficiency metrics for Kyren are awful, like so bad. Like, there isn't an efficiency metric you can pull that makes you feel good about Kyren Williams maintaining his job, but it's his versatility that keeps him on the field. And this is something Jordan Rodriguez talked about a while back, is that they don't have to substitute anything. They can play in a hurry up, and whether it's a goal line play or whether it's a passing down play or whether it's an early down run up the middle, whatever play they're running, Kyren Williams is up to the challenge there. He's a good pass blocker. He's a good pass catcher. He's a good goal line back. He's still got got just enough juice that he could rip off the occasional big play. So it's his versatility that makes him so valuable to this offense. It's not his EPA or his breakaway speed or his juke rate or any of the metrics that we care about. It's the versatility. They can keep that same package on the field for the entire drive down the field without having to make any sort of changes. And then that keeps the defenses on their heels, and it keeps defenses unable to make substitutions. So that's why Kyren Williams is valuable. But you talk about it in this round right here, round 3. I like all of the running backs in this round. Chase Brown, Kyren Williams, Breece Hall, James Cook. And that's why I'm kind of okay hitting wide receiver early in drafts, because I love this pocket of value right here. The only other non-running back that I'm kind of interested in round 3 is Jackson Smith-Njigba. And if
he was almost my pick.
Yeah.
He was almost my pick here.
And if I walk away with, a running back in round 1 or Jonathan Taylor in round 2, then Jackson Smith-Njigba is a lot more inviting in round 3. But if I start off wide receiver, I'm happy with any of these round 3 running backs being my RB1.
And I'm glad that you just gave the context there of builds will change the way you're drafting. So if you've already gone running back, you get to round 3, I probably wouldn't go running back again. I'd be looking at wide receiver, and that's a very different thing here. So Dave, Jackson Smith-Njigba is a guy I was going to talk about. I'm not going to bore everybody with that, but because we've talked about him before. But we need that context of, yes, we both like Chase Brown and Kyren Williams, but if you lucked out and you somehow got the 2 guys I talked about earlier, right? Like Bijan Robinson, I'm not going Bijan, Devon Achane, Kyren in a draft. I'm probably not. It's a good team, damn good team, but I'm probably not doing that. So I'm glad you gave that context there. Let's move on. Round 4 here. This is where things can tend to get a little spicy. I do think that people start to tend to take a little bit more risk here. Players that are going in the 4th that are just horribly mispriced, or we also typically tend to see these are the guys that are getting the hype for the breakout and they're getting pushed up draft boards. So who are you going with here?
I gave you a player before the show, Alvin Kamara, and I'm so tempted to just pivot to George Kittle. It's so hard to choose between these two. I think
that's
these
mine.
Are both...
You can't do it.
All right, then. All right, I'll let you take George Kittle.
You're not allowed.
Is a guy I've talked about Alvin Kamara so much on this show already this offseason. It's an out of sight, out of mind thing. He was hurt in the fantasy playoffs. He didn't help anybody win their leagues, so people just write him off as dead. And Alfredo, I know I kind of quizzed you on a show a couple of weeks ago asking where he was in scoring before the injury. He was the RB5 in half PPR. He was the RB3 in full PPR. And then he got hurt. But prior to getting injured, he was just a plug and play guy. He is the featured piece of this offense, second in the league in touches per game before that injury. And Dan Henry said this on a podcast that I was doing with him a couple of months ago, and it just really kind of made me think about it. I was already in on Alvin Kamara, but he said, he should be getting drafted somewhere in the Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry range. He's an aging running back who was hyper productive last year, but the injury is really the only thing that is causing him to get pushed down draft boards a little bit. The offense is going to be...
offense. Yeah.
The offense is going to be terrible, but the offense was terrible last year. They were one of the lowest scoring offenses in the league. They were dealing with Derek Carr injuries. They were dealing with Chris Olave injuries.
This is the Dennis Sonny in Philadelphia meme. I can go lower.
Yeah.
It can get worse.
and it could get worse. And who knows? Maybe they bring in a Kirk Cousins or trade for Jameis Winston or something like that. But it's not going to be good. But all the concerns we have about Tyler Shugg and Spencer Rattler, it's going to make their job a lot easier if they could just see Alvin Kamara sitting there in the flat and get the ball in his hands. This is a guy that hasn't really dipped in efficiency yet either. And a lot of times when running backs get to that age 29, age 30, 31, that's when we see that efficiency start to dip. And that's when I want to get out on these players. But we haven't seen the efficiency start to dip for Alvin Kamara. He is still a tackle breaking, pass catching, big play machine. He gets almost all of the goal line work here. And I am excited for Kendre Miller. I think that we might see a little bit more Kendre Miller this year than we have in years past. There's other people out there that are excited about the rookie Devin Neal. But at the end of the day, this is Alvin Kamara's team. I think that he's still going to be one of the most heavily involved running backs. And I think it's just an egregious misprice. If Alvin Kamara was getting drafted at the end of round 2, I'd still be drafting him frequently. But with him going at the end of round 4, often falling into round 5, he's just basically an auto pick for me at that point in the draft.
Yeah, man. It's crazy because I'm with you there on Alvin Kamara, and I think that round 4 is a hotbed for good running backs. Dude, rounds 3 and 4, like it almost does. I know we said at the beginning we don't want to go into a draft with a certain build in mind, but it does almost seem like an ideal way to start your draft is receiver, and then back-to-back running backs in rounds 3 and 4, because that does seem like
and Ken Walker, like there are some really good running backs still sitting there in round 4 too.
And those are two guys that, like, each of those were candidates for me today. Like, I want to talk about Amari and Hampton because, I mean, I'm seeing sharp drafters are taking him in the 3rd round. And now with the Najee Harris news, that ADP is actually going to reach the 3rd round. So, like, that's the only thing for me is, like, I'm not sure that I'll still be there on Amari and Hampton when we get to actual draft time, because that ADP could go up. Ken Walker's a guy that I really, really like. But I ended up going a different direction. And I know I already said it here earlier. George Kittle is the player that I ended up going with here in round 4. Rashee Rice is also another guy that I thought about as well. But the suspension, I think that ADP is going to go down. Like, he's probably going to end up being a 5th round pick. But George Kittle is the guy I ended up going with here. And I think a lot of it just has to do with, I want to be really good at premium positions. I either want to take guys really early or really late. And I don't see Brock Bowers as the guy that's differentiating me at the tight end spot, but I do see George Kittle as the guy that is a big separator between a top tier tight end and the rest of the guys that are going a little bit later. He was tight end 1 in points per game last year, and he just continues to defy the age gods in fantasy football. He's catching the ball further downfield than any other tight end with his average depth of target, and he's still being top 2 in yards after catch every single year. Like, this is a guy who, he's not just good at one thing, he's good at all of the things, and his 22% target share is near the top amongst all tight ends in the NFL. He's 2nd in red zone targets behind Trey McBride, except for some godforsaken reason he actually catches them. I don't know what happens with Trey McBride, man. Like, the targets just they float. But now there's no Deebo Samuel. We've got the concerns about Christian McCaffrey's Achilles going into this year. We've got injuries in the offseason with both Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. You've got the Jawan Jennings trade requests and the contract requests. What's going on there? You've got Brandon Ayuk, who might be slow to return.
Randy's dealing with an injury now too. Jawan Jennings on top of that.
Yeah, I said that. Yeah, it's like there are so many question marks on every single skill position on the Niners offense, except for George Kittle. And he's a guy that I don't want to say this incorrectly, but if I remember correctly, he had the top passer rating when targeted for any tight end in the league when Brock Purdy was targeting him. That is something that if I'm the quarterback that, yes, I got my contract, I want to target the guy that makes me most comfortable. Like, this is one of these things where this team I think is on the verge of blowing up, and what they need is some continuity. So for me, George Kittle, he's a safe pick here, but he has the upside of being the tight end 1 overall, which people are drafting their perceived tight end 1 overall in the 2nd round. So if I can get that in round 4, I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, you talk about him leading in quarterback rating when targeted. Do you know what else he leads in? Fantasy points. Yards per route run, yards per target, yards per reception,
I did say that.
Yards per team pass attempt, explosive rating, dominator rating, EPA, fantasy points per route run. I mean, he just leads in every single efficiency metric that we care about. And it is, he does block a lot. And that's something that people used to knock George Kittle years and years and years ago.
Who cares?
It doesn't matter. Exactly.
I'm so tired of that. Like the dude is going into year 8, and we're just like, hey, he's blocking. Like, shut up.
And also,
that frustrates me so much.
His route participation has also changed quite a bit. That was a big knock on him early in his career, but he is running more routes now than he was early in his career, and he is still maintaining the same efficiency that he was earlier in his career. So I know, I'm no stranger to having some big deviations in my rankings to the consensus. And anybody who watches the show knows that, but everybody is just, chalking up the same top 3 in their rankings this year, where it's Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, George Kittle. George Kittle's my tight end 1 this year. I don't care. There's no reason to bet against him. Like, he is such a good player. You talk about all of the question marks with the other pass catchers there. Brandon Ayuk injury, Deebo Samuel out of the picture, Jawan Jennings with what's going on with him. I do like Ricky Pearsall, don't get me wrong, but Christian McCaffrey, we're hoping that he can get healthy. The reality is that we might see George Kittle just be the number 1 weapon on this offense for the entire team, or for the entire season. So just egregiously mispriced, in my opinion. He's my tight end 1 again this year.
Well, that's certainly bold of you. I mean, I love George Kittle. I've got him at tight end 3. I've got Trey McBride at tight end 1. It's hard for me to I have Trey McBride ahead of Bowers. It's hard for me to move Bowers to tight end 3, but it's tight end, man. Like, that is very much within the realm of possibility. I think what it just tells me is that, like, I don't think either of us are buying into Brock Bowers hype in the second round. That just seems way too rich.
I mean, I
say
gotta
it.
be careful
Say it.
Brock Bowers is more likely to come up short of last year's numbers than he is to just grow off of year one. You look at it, just a whole new offense, new weapons there. I think last year they were kind of out of necessity forced to just run the offense through Brock Bowers. But now that they have a competent quarterback and now that they have a good running back, I think that we see more of a balanced offense. I think we see Jacoby Myers a little bit more involved. They made 2 big investments in the wide receiver position as well. So I love Brock Bowers. Again, we say this all the time. Don't hear what I'm not saying. Brock Bowers is a very, very good player, but I've got him, Trey McBride, and George Kittle all in the same tier. Brock Bowers is at the end of that tier. I'd prefer George Kittle and Trey McBride to Brock Bowers in a vacuum.
Yeah, I'm with you there, man.
And it sucks. Like, I hate having FOMO on Brock Bowers. Like, every time Brock Bowers has
at his price, though, I don't think I'm going to have any of him.
Yeah, I haven't drafted a single share of Brock Bowers this year. Like I said, done over 100 drafts, and he's one of those players that I'm just looking at, like, when I'm choosing between Lad McConkey and Drake London and Jonathan Taylor and Brock Bowers, I just can't stomach taking Bowers there.
Yeah, not likely. Well, Dave, you and we went through the first 4 rounds here, our favorite early players to target. And we mentioned some other ones, too, that we're really excited about as well. But we limited this down to just talking about 1 player each per round. You and I are going to be back again next week for 2 episodes again next week on Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday, we're going to have the mid-round players. Mid-round players that we're targeting. I almost said mid players. That's the kids say nowadays, mid. But yeah, the mid-round players that we're targeting. Rounds. Okay. Let's not do that late in the show. Rounds 5 through 8, and then the late round players, the sleepers that we're looking at rounds 9 and later. That'll be next week, and we're going to be ramping up the shows after that. It's going to go to 3 shows a week and then 4 shows a week, and then we're going to give you 5 episodes in the week leading up to your fantasy draft weekend. Dave's just finding this out for the first time.
All right, let me adjust my schedule.
And then once we get into the season, we're going to be on that regular schedule for you guys, talking about waivers, your starts and sits, and everything that you need for the week. As always, I want to thank everybody for watching or listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.